Hey guys, Raven of Ash here. After my last video, I've been playing other games. Today I want to discuss Bloodborne. Bloodborne is having a resurgence because of the games being free on the PS Store for PlayStation Plus owners. Saint Riot is doing some of his best work on this game in my opinion. Pincognito is also uploading some really cool Bloodborne content, and I have been playing the game quite a bit. I will upload some Bloodborne content in the future, but before I get to the slaying videos, I've decided to discuss some stuff with you about the invasion mechanics of this game. In my opinion, invasions in Bloodborne are inherently unbalanced, and I think they could not ever be fixed within the mechanics of this game. I believe From Software made an option to boost the PvE aspect of the game and didn't care a lot about the PvP, specifically in invasions. Before going in, let me tell you that I love Bloodborne. I love the PvE world From Software created, and I love the PvP combat system, its speed and its particular set of skills. I hate the netcode though. If people complained about it in Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne is an absolute mess. But I digress. Also, let me tell you that a lot of what is said in this video are just my opinions. It's kind of a tinfoil hat video, in which I cannot prove if a lot of the assumptions I make are correct. Let's get started. The core of this video is the issue that a lot of PvP-PvE hybrid games such as the Soulsborne franchise and Destiny, just to name a few, have been facing. How to have RPG mechanics that rely on making you stronger through playing the game extensively, but not be totally unbalanced in PvP, if you play against people that did not have the skill or time commitment to get stronger. This begs several questions. How can a PvP match be balanced if the guys that plays the game more often and are generally more skilled at the game for it, have better gear than the guy that does not and is generally less skilled? Rewarding players with the best gear will only widen the imbalance, true, but not allowing them to get the best gear through their effort is also unfair. This issue has been a hot topic of discussion in several games, and it's a very hard balance to get right. One good example was Destiny 1, whose footage you have been watching. The game features different perks on the weapons, how a weapon handles, how quickly can you aim down sights, how far it can shot in the case of shotguns, among many other examples. However, Destiny always had skill-based matchmaking for its PvP matches. This means that if you play well enough, you will get to play people that are as dedicated as you. Skill-based matchmaking helped the game become relatively balanced. Soulsborne games are very different beasts. Invasions in these games do not have skill-based matchmaking. You will fight the guy that picked the game up yesterday on one invasion, and on the next one the die-hard player that has been playing the game since launch. Also, in Destiny 1, or 2 for that matter, the damage of the weapons is normalized for PvP. This means that a perfectly rolled weapon would do the same damage as the same poorly rolled weapon in PvP. This is not the case in Bloodborne. In Bloodborne, the main attribute of the weapon, its damage, can vary wildly. Sometimes the same weapon, the same build, but with different upgrade levels and gems, can do more than 3 times the damage of a weapon with bad gems at the low upgrade level. This matters a lot in invasions. But why does the invasion system in Bloodborne allow such disparity of damage? For people less experienced in the game, I will now explain in broad strokes how invasion matchmaking works in Bloodborne. Differently from Dark Souls games, invasions in Bloodborne require, with the exception of a few areas in the game, for the host to ring a beckoning bell or a sinister bell in order to be invaded. When the host rings any of these bells, a bell maiden spawns in the host's world. This means that if a host is playing PvE solo, it is impossible for him to be invaded outside of the before-mentioned areas, because the host never rung one of those 2 bells. Conversely, when you invade, it is almost always against 2 or 3 players, because the beckoning bell has been rung, opening the host world to invasions. Killing the bell maiden after the invasion starts will not send the invader back into his world. Also, you can invade in a ridiculously wide blood level range. As a blood level 58, I can invade from blood level 44 to blood level 98. Also, and contrary to Dark Souls 3, your weapon upgrade is irrelevant for matchmaking. You can have your weapons at plus 10 and invade a host with an upgraded weapon, or vice versa. The only thing that is necessary is for you to be within the required blood level range. With this simple explanation out of the way, let's take a closer look of what I believe were the biggest influencers of Bloodborne invasion mechanics. The concept of Chalice dungeons is an interesting one. Miyazaki said the following in 2 different interviews in 2015. The idea for the Chalice dungeons actually came from a kind of a different place. First, I think that with the sort of games we make, difficult games where the fun lies in the strategy you tackle the game with, it's hard to beat the surprise factor you get when you play it for the first time. That period when you're groping around for a way to get past new and unknown difficulties, then sharing your experience with everyone and chatting about this and that. That kind of fun naturally doesn't last forever, but we were wondering if there was some way we could keep that going, even if it was just in a virtual kind of way. That was what first led to the Chalice Dungeon idea. About the gem system, Miyazaki said in another interview the following: "In terms of how many physical weapons there are, the amount is less than in a Souls game, but that's to some extent a decision made due to the game design. The weapons transform, so one weapon will have various uses and strategies that you can implement. You can also customize your weapons with blood gems. There are different types and you can slot in up to 3 at a time. One gem might have you use less stamina per swing, for example. You can have many different combinations, so actually the amount of weapons in Souls is absorbed in Bloodborne by this customization element, and how someone can tailor a weapon to how they want to use it. In a way, the variety is still there, but it's absorbed down on a customization level rather than in the quantity of actual weapons, much more than in Souls." Both quotes from these two interviews are interesting, but no connection seems to be made between the Chalice Dungeons and the gem system. According to the interviews, the Chalice Dungeons would be for retaining that sense of wonder of playing a level for the first time and sharing it with your friends or the community, and the gems to compensate for the lack of different weapons relatively to a Dark Souls game, adding more weapon customization. Now, I'm going on a limb here and say the following. The gem system exists to compensate the lack of diversity of weapons, true, but it also exists to draw people to the Chalice Dungeons. And Chalice Dungeons exist because of the gems they reward the player with. They feed from one another. If the base game did not have any gem system, would it be less interesting? Do people really care about gems in the NG runs? And even for higher game cycles, leveling up can account for that, at least it always has on Dark Souls games. As most people use gems to increase the damage, is the gem system a necessity or a hook to attract people to the Chalice Dungeons? This said, of course that you can farm for gems in the main game in DLC, and some of them are pretty good as well. This does not mean that the Chalice Dungeons were not the main incentive, or at least one of the strongest, for the creation of a gem system in my opinion. This is seconded by the fact that almost all good gems in the base game or in the DLC are physical damage gems, droplets. If you want other kinds of gems necessary for perfecting arcane or blood tinge builds, for example, you better start gathering those ritual materials. This means that all players can have an RPG advantage in the form of big damage boosts for going to the dungeons and or farming for gems. This did not need to be like this. Gems could only have PvE advantage, or passive perks like stamina reduction on attacks. The thing is, any activity in a game has to have a goal. This is true, except maybe for beating the main game, which is its own objective that does not need to be rewarded specifically. This means that for a challenging activity such as Chalice Dungeons, there needs to be a specific goal in order for people to feel rewarded and play that content. There must have been a time, while developing the game, that the team was thinking about this issue. If we are going to do this dungeon thing, how will we make it interesting for players? They knew that what they were developing was not as wildly interesting as the base game. Without good rewards, who the hell is going through those dungeons? Gems, someone said. We will give players the most powerful gems that can only be awarded in the dungeons. We give the players raw power. It will help players both in PvP and in PvE. About this issue, there's an interesting sentence in that last interview excerpt that I have already read, in which Miyazaki stated, "One gem might have you use less stamina per swing, for example. Seems innocuous, right? Some accessory perks to the weapons are cool, keeps the game fresh, nice." Except that was not what From Software did. If you look at all the gems effects, only 4 do not have the possibility of directly causing an increase in damage. Reduced stamina cost, rapid poison, slow poison gems, and HP continues to recover gems. All the other gems are about doing more damage in PvP, PvE, or both. It's interesting that Miyazaki chose the more innocuous example in the interview, right? Yeah, I think he knew what raw damage can do to balance. You see, gems could have perks that had a much less direct impact on PvE than raw damage. This is easier said than done, because if gems made little difference or were just accessory perks, would people still do the Chalice Dungeons? Would you beat the File Damatala at blood level 40 to get some stamina saving gems? By choosing big rewards for doing certain activities, From Software heavily punished those who didn't, because they don't want to, like the dude that does not want to farm but wants to invade, or people that were invaded and didn't farm for gems, at least yet. And that's why invasions in Bloodborne are too much farm to win, in my opinion. This might seem like a puzzling question, and I think the answer ties in with the Chalice dungeons and the gem system. Let me explain. As stated before, you can invade +0 hosts with a +10 weapon or vice versa. The imbalance is obvious. Why did From Software allow this? A simple answer would be that all the Souls game until Bloodborne only had one invasion parameter, which was a soul level, and never a secondary parameter like weapon upgrade level. Dark Souls 2 dabbled with the concept of soul memory, and From Software was hated by the community for it. Only on Dark Souls 3 the two-condition system was put into place. Soul level and upgrade level. So a simple answer was that a double condition mechanism was not implemented in past games, and so it was not implemented in Bloodborne because of that. They hadn't invented it yet. Maybe that's the right answer. It's kind of the Occam's razor of Bloodborne matchmaking, if you will. However, if you think about it, it's a relatively simple system, so I thought the developers didn't think of this before. So there might be more to this than meets the eye. First of all, there's the obvious reason that not having a weapon upgrade condition makes invasion easier to find, as there is only the blood level condition. However, the most important reason for me is that if matchmaking also had a weapon upgrade condition, and if you wanted to invade Twinked, or on the other side of the coin with a customized character, which was a big From Software goal for this game, it would be much harder. There would be a loop of not being able to beat certain Chalice dungeon bosses because you don't have the gems for it, and you don't do the damage for it because you couldn't upgrade your weapon further because you wanted to get invasions at blood level 50 +6, for example. And because you couldn't beat those bosses, you couldn't get those sweet gems. Paradoxically, it would make twinking in invasions twice as difficult at low levels because of your low blood level and low weapon upgrade, but much easier at high levels because your weapon could be at +10 and you could be at blood level 90, for example. In my opinion, by not enforcing a weapon upgrade condition, From Software wants the invader to be free to tailor his damage output and therefore the difficulty of his invasion. By this I mean that the invader has more leeway to upgrade its weapon and farm for gems in the main game or in the DLC or in the Chalice dungeons without the fear of missing out on invasions. But then, how can you balance the game for absolutely distinct realities that lead to wildly different damage outputs? Simple answer, you can't. Not without severely changing the gem system or relying on invaders to balance their own damage, adjusting its output for invasions. In my view, the Chalice dungeons and the gem system promotes more PvE gameplay, through gem farming and dungeon crawling, but sorely endangers balance in invasions. This was understood and accepted by From Software as a necessary evil. And this brings us to these imbalances that I've stated had an obvious reflection on the bell system. A lot of people think that the bell system does not make sense. In light of what I stated before, I think it makes perfect sense. Because of the potential imbalance of the gem system compounding by the non-existence of weapon upgrade as a matchmaking condition, From Software decided to make the most restrictive invasion system in the Soulsborne franchise. It decided to protect lone hosts from invaders, except in a few areas of the game, and it made invasions against multiple opponents the rule. This helped turn more casual invaders away from invasions, because casual invaders didn't farm for gems, and always had to fight several opponents, which is not easy at first. However, the damage that can be achieved by dedicated invaders, who also tend to be relatively skilled players, led to peace-easy invasions for them. Yeah, From Software left it to the strongest invaders to balance their own invasions. Saint Riot, for example, uses full power versions of weapons and lower damage versions of the same weapons. I sometimes do what I call the blood vial game. I invade with full power weapons, but I will not recharge my blood vials until I have less than 6, and try to make fights last long and will not punish the host's heals. Most overpowered invaders, however, probably just go full on throttle and destroy the opposing party, and I can totally see their point. However, it probably isn't very fun for the opposing party, and even for them it will probably get boring after a while. Finally, there is other aspect that I want to bring to your attention that is also a source of imbalance. This is something I don't see a lot of people talking about, but invading or being invaded in Bloodborne is expensive. Very expensive. This is because even if you do not use any other items, you will always consume blood vials and quicksilver bullets. Run out of those items and you are basically dead. Good luck killing a boss without those items. Farming for those is time consuming up to late game, where there are blood echo farming routes that allow you to buy blood vials and quicksilver bullets in bulk. This mechanic is quite different from Dark Souls 3. In Dark Souls 3, Parries are basically free, and Estus recharges at the bonfire. As an invader, you won't even waste any of your Host of Ember Estus while invading. As a host, you can basically sit at the bonfire after an invasion, win or lose, and replenish that Estus. Basically, the only cost for losing an invasion as an Host of Embers or an invader is that your souls will be left where you died, and in the host's case, he will become an Ember. That's it. In Bloodborne, the Quicksilver and Blood Vial system means that invading before having access to good late-game farming spots is very risky. The footage you are seeing is from a Blood level 58 invasion in the Unseen Village. I don't have PvP runes equipped, and I'm not twinked at all. I just decided to invade while doing my playthrough. Long story short, these guys were handing it to me. At the end, I had used all of my Blood Vials, and then I finally got the win. It was a long invasion, and between the three of us, we must have gone through 50 Blood Vials. I had some vials on storage, and so I could avoid farming for those, but the vial mechanic stopped me from invading anymore until I had a lot of resources. This vial mechanic forces an invader to wait until the endgame to invade, or risk having to farm vials during your playthrough. By the time you get to the endgame, in order to secure a big supply of Blood Vials and Quicksilver bullets, I will also be in areas where I can farm for powerful gems. So the vial bullet mechanism also serves as a twink enabler mechanic, compounding the issues discussed above. Dark Souls 3 gave invaders and hosts a much more controlled PvP environment because it integrated two conditions for matchmaking: soul level and weapon upgrade. Also, it did not allow customization of the weapons via a system analogous to the gem system. You can do builds that do a lot of damage in Dark Souls 3, but you will have to make trade-offs, namely survivability. Not in Bloodborne, in where you can do a lot of damage through the gem system without really sacrificing anything. The Dark Souls 3 invasion mechanism kept invasions reasonably fair for people that just wanted to progress through the game, and challenging for the invader through the game's life cycle. And I feel that was a big part of why that game's invasions are still so popular. It became more about what you do in the invasion as opposed to how you farmed for them. Could I play Bloodborne invasions for 2 years like I did with Dark Souls 3? I severely doubt it. And one of the reasons is that invasions can wildly vary in difficulty, and not just because of my build or how well or bad I play. It becomes less about skill than gear, and that's not a good multiplayer formula in any game. Facing a password summoned phantom with 27%ers is hardly fair. He can literally kill me in 3 hits. How is this fun? I guess a lot of hosts and opposing parties are thinking the same about me. Invasions in Bloodborne can become too easy or very hard very fast. And that's the reason why I prefer to have a more balanced PvP invasion environment. It is very weird for me that in Bloodborne balance depends on the fully twinked invader agreeing to it, needing him to hamper himself by equipping lower damaging weapons to make the fights competitive, for example. Also, I can totally understand that if you took 35 hours to find those 27%ers in the Chalice dungeons, hampering yourself is not something you find very appealing. I believe this structural imbalance, among other factors, affected the invasion life cycle of Bloodborne. All of this resulted in less will to interact online, which was also compounded by the weird bell system that, in my opinion, was put into place to compensate the perceived imbalances. This said, because of the game's mechanics, there is no way of fixing these issues without what a lot of the community would feel like unreasonable trade-offs. Disposing of the Blood Vial Quicksilver bullet mechanic, not enabling gems in PvP, or even adding the weapon upgrade to the matchmaking requirements would be akin to playing a different game, and probably that's why From Software decided never to touch too much on these mechanics through the game's lifecycle. I am very interested to see if the Shadows Die Twice game follows a more Bloodborne model or a more Dark Souls 3 model of invasions. All of this said, don't think that I hate the game or that I am just a Dark Souls 3 fanboy. That game has its own issues, and I've made a video on what changes I would make to that game. This one, however, I believe it's unfixable. Again, this does not mean that I don't love this game since it came out in 2015, and I still have a lot of fun with it. Yeah, the fact that I feel like invasions are unbalanced in this game do not mean that they are not fun, at least for a small period of time. They are two different concepts, balance and fun. Also, I am working on some videos on the builds and weapons that I'm having fun invading with. Oh dudes, if you liked the video, think about subscribing to the channel, leaving a like or commenting, it greatly helps. Thanks a lot for watching guys, and I'll see you next time. Raven out.